Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take on the overwhelming current of modern information, filter out all the noise, and really just try to deliver the pure, refined knowledge you need.
Today, we're undertaking, I think, a really essential journey. We're doing a deep dive into a feeling that just seems to define 21st century exhaustion. It's that sense of having a fried brain.
Right, that feeling. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, that perpetual state of being distracted, overwhelmed, and just constantly drawn toward this compulsive digital consumption. We're going to look at the powerful scientific reasons why we feel this way, and more importantly, what practical, actionable steps anyone can take.
Starting today.
Starting today, exactly, to increase their focus, to really boost productivity, and just fundamentally improve their mood.
And we have an exceptionally rich stack of source material for this. It's fascinating because it spans the personal and the clinical. On one side, we've got these deeply personal, sometimes really raw anecdotal accounts.
Like from Reddit.
Exactly. Viral threads on Reddit describing things like extreme comfort addiction. There's this one desperate cry, my dopamine and neural circuitry is definitely compromised to max level by now. I mean, these are people feeling the real live pain of this.
And we're pairing that raw experience with some really rigorous expert analysis. Our dive is going to leverage the wisdom from pivotal works in behavioral science and digital wellness. So we're looking at Cal Newport's philosophy in digital minimalism, Dr. Anna Lembke's critical work on addiction in Dopamine Nation.
A huge one.
Oh, it's foundational. And also some specific neuroscientific reviews that really dissect everything from the mechanics of reward systems to, the actual criteria for internet gaming disorder.
So our mission today is laser focused. We're cutting through all the self-help noise and just extracting the practical evidence-based steps that can truly change your daily experience. For anyone listening right now who feels, tethered to their device or like you're constantly behind the curve of your own potential, the core question we are tackling is this.
And it's a big one.
It is. How do we fundamentally break the cycle of instant gratification when the very tools we use, the social platforms, the games, the streaming services, are intentionally engineered to keep us hooked minute by minute?
Let's get started.
So we have to start by confronting this paradox that really drives this whole conversation. We know intellectually that doom scrolling or, mindlessly checking our phones or chasing digital drama, we know it makes us feel worse.
Oh, absolutely.
One person in our sources even said this habit contributes to a constant state of elevated anxiety, and yet that pull is just so strong that we keep reaching for the device. So what's the fundamental, almost evolutionary mismatch that's creating this compulsion?
It comes down to a really crucial concept in behavioral science. We are trying to manage a new environment with an old brain.
An old brain.
An old brain. Our foundational reward pathways, which are, conserved across millions of years of mammalian evolution, were designed for a world of absolute scarcity.
Scarcity being the key word, right?
Right.
The system was meant to ensure survival.
Precisely. Dopamine was released to reinforce behaviors that were critical and rare. Finding food, securing shelter, pursuing a successful hunt, finding a mate. The brain says, okay, that action led to a necessary, infrequent payoff, so let's engrave that pathway and repeat the action when the cues reappear. It was a highly effective system.
For that environment?
For that environment, yeah. It promoted survival in a world where resources we have to find.
But now, in the 21st century, the rules of the environment have just completely changed.
They've been flipped upside down. We now live in an environment of engineered inundation. The things that trigger this ancient, powerful reward pathway, sugary foods, pornography, gambling, digital media, financial trading, they're all easily accessible, they're cheap, and they're specifically engineered to deliver a faster, more intense dopamine spike than anything that happens naturally.
So they've hijacked the system.
They've completely hijacked a system built for scarcity, making us treat these hyper-potent, often harmful behaviors as if they're survival necessities.
And this leads right into a misunderstanding of the neurochemistry itself. We always hear dopamine called the pleasure chemical. But if it's designed for survival reinforcement, that seems, too simplistic. What's dopamine's true specific role in driving this seeking behavior?
The neuroscience on this is really clear. Dopamine's primary function is not pleasure. It is about anticipation and reinforcement. It's the motivation, the wanting, and the seeking behavior. The pleasure component is primarily handled by other chemicals like endogenous opioids. Dopamine is the energy that drives the search.
So if I see a notification pop up on my phone, it's the anticipation of potentially important or rewarding information that floods the system, not actually reading the message itself.
Exactly. And we see this validated in controlled studies. If you consider the research by Sprecklemeyer back in 2009, they put participants in an fMRI scanner and had them anticipate receiving a monetary reward. And crucially, even before the money was delivered, the specific dopamine pathways, particularly the ventral tegmental area, the VTA, which is the origin point for dopamine and the reward pathway, they became highly active.
So the brain was already celebrating.
It was celebrating the expectation of the reward. It was boosting motivation based on what was at stake.
That's a fascinating insight.
Mm-hmm.
If the motivation is driven by anticipation, it explains why we feel so compelled to open the app before we even know what the notification is. And this mechanism, it's not limited to tangible rewards like money, is it?
Absolutely not. And this is really the pivot point for understanding the whole digital dilemma. Social rewards trigger this exact same ancient hardware. Think about the 2018 study led by Sherman, where researchers had adolescents use a simulated social media photo sharing app while they were undergoing an fMRI scan.
And what happened when the participants got a high number of likes on their photos?
Well, when that social approval hit, the same core components of the reward circuit, the VTA, where the dopamine originates, and the nucleus accumbens, which processes and acts on those reward signals, they showed dramatic increased activity.
So it was functionally identical.
Functionally identical to the brain's reaction when receiving tangible rewards like a piece of chocolate or, hard cash.
So the drive for social validation, the thing that helped us secure our place in the tribe millennia ago, is now being directly monetized by software engineers. Our ancient social hardwiring is being targeted.
Which brings us to the most powerful and, frankly, the most insidious design tactic, the mechanism of variable rewards. If the payoff were guaranteed, if every time you checked Facebook you saw 10 likes, the brain would habituate and the motivation would drop off.
That makes perfect sense. We'd get used to the reward and the hit would lose its potency.
But when the payoff is unpredictable, the anticipation just spikes. It creates the slot machine analogy. That unpredictability intensifies the urge to keep checking, maximizing the pleasure derived from the seeking behavior and driving the motivation to return again and again. You pull the lever because your brain is thinking, maybe this time, maybe the next notification is the big one.
And this isn't some random outcome. This variability is baked into the design of pretty much every product in the attention economy.
It's the engine. Social media feeds, mobile games, the infinite scroll, even dating apps are built around this unpredictable feedback mechanism. The anticipation of the next notification or the viral post or the next match keeps us compulsively checking.
Which leads to those 96 checks a day on average.
It's exactly how we get there.
So when we are constantly engaging this hyperpotent reward system, checking 96 times a day, what are the specific behavioral red flags that show we've crossed the line from just using a tool to having a compulsive behavior that actively shatters our productivity?
I think the first and clearest flag is compulsive checking. This is the action of reaching for the phone without conscious thought.
The automatic pilot move.
The automatic pilot move.
Right.
You pick it up while you're waiting for a traffic light to change, or during a pause in conversation, or the second you wake up, before you've even formed a conscious thought. This shatters your uninterrupted time into these tiny, useless shards. One of our sources aptly described this as leaving no mental space for intentional living.
And when we look at more structured digital activities, like video games, the systems they use are almost masterclasses in maximizing retention.
Oh, they utilize classic behavioral conditioning. They rely on achievement structures, things like leveling up, achievement unlocks, daily missions, and continuous reward schedules to create this perpetual motivation.
But there's something else too, isn't there? The social aspect.
That's often what creates the highest level of compulsion. It's the social obligation built into multiplayer formats. Guilds, teams, and the fear of letting down your remote teammates create this enormous pressure to log in and maintain engagement, often far exceeding the actual enjoyment of the game itself. It weaponizes our ancient social wiring against our own time.
So if the brain is being constantly flooded by these potent reward signals, hundreds of times per day, what are the physiological and mental consequences?
Yeah.
Particularly for our ability to focus and manage our mood.
The costs are substantial and they're measurable. Firstly, chronic overstimulation can lead to outright addiction, where the brain becomes reliant on elevated dopamine production just to feel normal. This leads to severe withdrawal symptoms, irritability, anxiety, and depression when that stimulus is removed.
So the brain literally builds a tolerance and then needs more and more just to function at its own baseline.
Exactly. And secondly, this chronic over-reliance leads to impaired rational decision-making and increased impulsivity. The limbic system, that ancient reward system, it starts to override the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain associated with executive control, long-term planning, and rational choice.
So you start choosing the immediate, easy pleasure over the hard, long-term goal.
Every time.
And in terms of mood and sustained focus, the long-term price must be enormous.
It is. When the reward system is perpetually overactive, it fundamentally contributes to severe mental health issues. Researchers studying individuals with diagnosed internet gaming disorder IGD find clear neurobiological correlates: decreased gray and white matter volume, impaired functional connectivity in the prefrontal cortex.
In layman's terms.
In layman's terms, this compulsive consumption literally makes the brain less capable of sustained focus, emotional regulation, and cognitive control. It's what that person on Reddit meant when they said their brain felt fried. It's an inability to engage in focused work.
And that inability to focus is precisely why 1 hour of focused deep work is so often cited as being worth 4 hours of distracted work. If your attention is constantly being called back to the slot machine in your pocket, you simply can't achieve that high-quality, high-value productivity.
And that leads us directly to the solution. We have to halt this continuous cycle of self-medicating with distraction.
Okay, so we've established the problem is this overloaded, desensitized reward system. So the first big, actionable step toward reclaiming focus and stability, and this is advocated by experts like Dr. Lemke, is implementing a temporary reset.
Right, what's often called a dopamine detox or a dopamine fast.
Now, that term dopamine detox can sound a little extreme, maybe a bit buzzwordy. Let's define exactly what this involves and, crucially, what its real goal is.
It involves taking a temporary, often 30-day break from non-essential, highly pleasurable, and highly stimulating activities. The list can be extensive, but the point is intentionality. So, pausing social media, most video games, streaming, pornography, excessive shopping, and sometimes even cutting back significantly on, say, caffeine, alcohol, or hyperpalatable sugary foods.
And you mentioned the goal isn't to eliminate dopamine entirely, which that would be impossible anyway. What's the true behavioral target here?
The goal is to restore behavioral flexibility. We need to weaken those conditioned links between the cue, the phone, the notification sound, the feeling of boredom, and the impulsive-compulsive response. By creating a temporary hiatus, we allow the brain's dopamine receptors to recover their sensitivity.
So it's like shutting down a factory that's been overproducing and wearing out its machinery, just giving the system a chance to resensitize itself.
Exactly. And just as importantly, the detox requires radical honesty and accountability. If you attempt to stop an activity for 30 days and you find it excruciatingly difficult, that provides you with undeniable personal data about your relationship with that activity. This radical self-reflection is the necessary first step to breaking the cycle and implementing permanent change.
That honesty is crucial. Now, let's get into the immediate, tangible benefits for productivity and mood, because we have some really concrete anecdotal evidence of the payoff from this kind of reset. We have the example of a user who went through a rigorous 30-day phone detox and tracked their metrics meticulously.
Their story is a powerful illustration of the time thief that these devices represent. This individual implemented strategies to increase friction and intentional tracking, and it paid off immediately. The measurable change was just staggering. Their weekly average screen time plummeted from 7 hours per day down to just 2 hours per day by the end of the 4th week.
7 hours to 2 hours. Let's pause on that for a second. That is an enormous amount of time. But when you run the numbers, what does that reduction actually look like in terms of recaptured time in the span of a single week?
It translates to this user gaining back approximately 42 hours in that final week alone.
42 hours.
42 hours. Think about that. That is essentially a full-time productive work week or an entire extra weekend reclaimed from mindlessly staring at a screen.
That's incredible. Most of us struggle to find 2 hours a day for our high-value pursuits. That realization alone has to be a powerful motivator. Did this immediately address that feeling of constantly working from behind?
Yes. The sheer mass of recaptured time immediately reduced stress linked to procrastination and that feeling of never having enough time for deep work. But beyond the quantity of time, there were immediate mood benefits. The user reported having significantly more space in their day-to-day existence and a massive reduction in that constant state of elevated anxiety.
So the thing they thought was helping them distract themselves was actually the source of the anxiety.
It was the primary contributor to their elevated stress level. They realized that habitual phone checking wasn't a distraction, it was the problem.
And the practical productivity benefits compounded this. By reducing task bouncing, that constant shifting of attention between the task at hand and the checking mechanism, the quality of their work must have improved dramatically. So the time saved was actually multiplied by the improved focus.
Precisely. You shift from shallow work, which is easily interrupted and produces low value, to deep work, which demands sustained concentration and produces measurable results. The detox restores your capacity for deep work.
But the detox is temporary. If your brain is used to operating at a certain level of stimulation, how do you prevent a quick relapse? How do we accelerate the physiological recovery to make those gains permanent?
That's the critical sustainability question. We need to introduce a physiological accelerator, and that is pressing on the pain. This is where we leverage the brain's natural compensation mechanisms.
Pressing on the pain sounds, I don't know, it sounds like something out of a self-flagellation manual. How does intentionally engaging in discomfort help improve our mood and balance?
It's based on the opponent process mechanism, a key concept in addiction science. Think of your brain's pleasure and pain system as a balance scale, or a ledger. The brain constantly strives for balance, for homeostasis.
Okay.
When we spike the pleasure side with artificial potent stimuli, say massive sugar consumption or continuous digital rewards, the brain fights back. It creates a counter-reaction, pushing the balance toward the pain side. That counter-reaction is what we experience as tolerance, dependence, anxiety, and depression.
So the higher the high, the deeper the brain pushes us into the corresponding low to maintain that balance.
Exactly. When the drug wears off, you're left with the pain side imbalance, the craving, the anxiety. The solution is simple. By intentionally introducing mild short-term pain or discomfort, we force the brain to shift the balance back toward pleasure to compensate. And the pleasure derived from this is generated by an indirect, healthy source, making it far less likely to create the tolerance and dependence we see with direct rewards.
So we're using intentional effort and discomfort to kind of turbocharge the recovery of our natural happiness sensors.
What are the most practical, healthy activities that achieve this physiological shift?
The sources are pretty consistent on a few key areas. The most accessible and powerful is rigorous exercise. Physical activity speeds up the recovery of dopamine receptors in the brain, which is essential for feeling natural pleasure again. And exercise itself provides a healthy, moderate dopamine surge, which directly helps to curb the cravings for the artificial rewards.
So it's a constructive replacement behavior that gives you a genuine physiological reward without the chemical crash. It's a phenomenal dual benefit for health and for focus. Another tool that achieves this physiological shift is cold water exposure, things like brief cold showers or planned ice baths.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a very sharp, short burst of controlled discomfort that immediately forces the brain and body into an intense state of awareness and focus. It's a healthy way to press on the pain side, and it results in a stable, non-tolerized dopamine release that lasts far longer than the discomfort itself.
And the sources emphasize that this doesn't just have to be physical pain or discomfort, right? It can be mental or intellectual strain.
Absolutely. Dr. Lemke advocates for engaging in other hard activities. This could mean reading a genuinely challenging book that requires real mental strain, or tackling a difficult household project like intricate carpentry or a complex appliance repair, or dedicating serious time to altruistic service. Anything that frustrates you requires sustained effort and demands your full attention helps restore your baseline.
Like the person who achieved sobriety in one of the sources.
Exactly. They managed to convert their destructive addiction into being addicted to suffering physically, like running or going to the gym, replacing a negative compulsion with a positive, demanding ritual.
So the key seems to be replacing the easy passive reward with the hard effortful one.
Intentional struggle. That is the accelerator for resetting the entire system.
Okay, so the detox gives us the reset,
Yeah.
and focusing on hard effort accelerates the physiological recovery. But those steps are pretty much pointless unless we adopt a permanent, sustainable philosophy.
Yeah.
We need a guardrail against sliding back into the noise. And that brings us to digital minimalism.
Right.
Now, this isn't about throwing out all technology. It's about being profoundly intentional about what we allow into our lives.
Digital minimalism is defined in our sources as a philosophy where technology is only used for a limited range of optimized activities that strongly support your personal values. The difference between a minimalist and an average user is simple. Most people passively stumble backward into their digital habits just based on convenience. Minimalists actively and intentionally design their habits based on what they deeply value. The core tenet is intentionality over convenience.
And to start that design process, we have to recognize the true cost of digital clutter. The sources reference Thoreau's powerful concept of the new economics. What does that mean in a modern digital context?
Well, Thoreau provided this stark axiom. The cost of a thing is the amount of what I will call life, which is required to be exchanged for it. Standard economics focuses on monetary cost, but this new economics forces us to calculate cost in terms of our finite life currency, time and attention.
So we have to balance the small, perceived profit of low-value digital engagement, the occasional new connection, the brief distraction against the tremendous cost measured in life sacrificed.
Exactly. And when you look at the cumulative effect of constant checking, that cost calculation becomes horrifyingly skewed. When you confront your habits through this lens, you realize that the cumulative cost of non-crucial digital clutter, the shallow interactions, the anxiety of missing out, the task bouncing, it often far outweighs the tiny benefits each individual piece of clutter promises. A minimalist treats their minutes of attention like a concrete, valuable substance, and they refuse to trade it away cheaply just because an application is convenient.
So once we've accepted that cost, what are the actionable strategies for optimizing our technology used to maximize productivity?
Let's start with the law of diminishing returns and how we consume information.
The law of diminishing returns dictates that continuously investing time in any specific tool or information source, like incessantly checking news sites or scrolling through the same social feed, yields less and less marginal benefit over time. That return curve flattens out dramatically. We quickly reach a natural limit where continued engagement provides diminishing returns, but the time cost just keeps increasing toward infinity. So we need to pull back right before that curve flattens out. So what is the core optimization strategy? You called it the digital declutter and introducing friction.
Yes, friction is the essential tool. The most successful, actionable strategy, which leads to immediate time savings, is to remove social media and high distraction apps from your phone entirely. The phone should only house essential utility apps.
But wait, if I still access Instagram or Twitter on my desktop computer later, isn't the overall time spent the same? How does this increase focus?
Because the friction is massive. On your phone, the app is one tap away, ready for that knee-jerk response to boredom or anxiety. It's just too easy to pull the lever 96 times a day. By removing the app and forcing yourself to use a computer browser, you create three barriers. First, you have to consciously decide to sit down at a dedicated machine. Second, you have to type the address. And third, the web interface is usually less optimized for constant short engagement than the mobile app is.
So it dramatically reduces time spent while barely diminishing the actual high-value benefit you get, like connecting with family.
You exchange convenience for intentionality.
That's a subtle but powerful shift. The goal is just to make the highly addictive activity slightly annoying to access. What's the next step for increasing productive focus, especially on the computer, which is usually the primary tool for deep work?
We need to turn our general-purpose computers and phones back into single-purpose tools, at least during designated focus periods. General-purpose computing often jumbles the roles of time. The same machine that handles your spreadsheet also handles your entire social life, which makes distractions seamless.
So how do we separate those roles and enforce that separation?
Through blocking tools, software like Freedom or Self-Control allows you to temporarily shut down distracting features, specific apps, or entire categories of websites for predetermined amounts of time. You essentially lock the distracting web away while you work.
And the data on this is impressive, isn't it?
It's transformative. Internal research from Freedom, for instance, reveals that their users gain, on average, 2.5 hours of productive time per day simply by using the software to enforce intentional focus sessions.
2.5 hours a day.
Think about what you could achieve with 2.5 hours of pure, undistracted effort every single day. That's a massive return on investment, and it translates immediately into greater productivity and less anxiety about unfinished tasks.
That statistic is a game changer. For a professional or a student, that's the difference between feeling stressed and feeling deeply productive. Now, what about the most radical form of optimization? Alternative hardware.
For those who realize the smartphone is the primary Trojan horse of the digital attention economy, the most powerful choice is changing the hardware itself. You can switch to a dumb phone or adopt a tethered device like the light phone, which is elegantly designed to only handle essential communication tasks, calls, texts, navigation.
So you essentially forward your existing number to this minimal device, leaving your smart capabilities locked away at home.
Correct. It provides a tremendous sense of freedom from the constant attack on your attention. While this practice might be too extreme for users who rely on high-fidelity mobile apps for their livelihood, for many, just removing the smartphone as the ubiquitous companion significantly simplifies the effort to reclaim focus and attention throughout the day.
Let's shift focus to how we consume information. How does the concept of slow media fit into the digital minimalist framework?
Slow media is the necessary antidote to the compulsive click cycle, which, as we noted, is the news equivalent of just snacking on empty calories like Doritos. This frantic, continuous clicking is bolstered by economic pressure checking 10 different sites 10 times a day, deposits more money into the attention economy's bank accounts, even though it leaves you less informed and more anxious.
So the goal is quality over frequency.
We need to maximize the quality of information consumed and minimize the frequency of checking. The actionable step here is to create intentional rituals around consumption. Isolate news consumption to set bounded times and locations. For example, check the news once a day during a 15-minute window, or ritualize reading by downloading long-form articles in advance and reading them offline without any internet distraction.
This sounds like approaching news consumption like a professional rather than an anxious consumer.
Exactly. Professionals, even those in digital media, approach platforms with a careful, planned strategy. They use curated Twitter lists for specific professional fields. They check highly addictive platforms maybe once a week for essential personal updates, and they ignore the rest. They extract maximum value without allowing the medium to dictate their time.
To bring this all together with a measurable example, let's revisit that anecdotal success story. The person who saved 42 hours in a week. Their success was based entirely on rigorous tracking. How did they structure their plan to achieve such measurable results?
They turned their attention into a tracked metric, which is highly motivating for anyone with that learner persona. First, they set weekly goals for productive activities to replace the wasted time, things like reading a chapter, taking a walk, or making a scheduled call to family. Then they enforced boundaries using an app blocker that was difficult to bypass. They tracked the aggregate number of phone pickups per day, aiming to drop from 120 down to 50.
And for the most addictive apps, they use those specific intentional unblocks.
That was the game changer. They kept certain high-stimulus apps blocked at all times, only allowing access through a conscious unblock session, rigidly limited to 5, 10, or 15 minutes. By week 4, they had limited social media to just 5 intentional unblocks per day. The combination of setting friction, tracking phone pickups, and measuring the time saved allowed them to see the quantitative benefits, those 42 hours saved, which provided undeniable motivation to maintain the focus-boosting habits permanently. They replaced chaotic consumption with structured intentionality.
Okay, so to sustain the gains in productivity we've been talking about, we have to address two fundamental human needs that are often the first casualties of digital clutter.
Right. Solitude and high-quality leisure. If we don't satisfy these needs, the brain will always seek artificial, low-quality substitutes.
Let's start with solitude. In a world of constant connectivity, that word can sound intimidating, even lonely. What is the precise definition of solitude in this context?
It's not physical isolation. You can feel profoundly alone in a crowd. Solitude is defined as freedom from input from other minds. It's the time and space to think, to reflect, and to process without having to react to the continuous clatter of civilization, the texts, the alerts, the opinions.
It's a time when your brain is running its own program, rather than being a server for external demands.
Precisely. Historically, great thinkers understood its necessity. Abraham Lincoln, for instance, he often retreated to a quiet cottage away from the bustle of the White House to find that space, specifically when he was wrestling with monumental decisions like the Emancipation Proclamation. He knew deep thinking requires deferring to your own cognitive rhythms.
And what are the universal benefits of this practice for the modern person, particularly for our mood and productivity?
Our sources highlight 3 crucial benefits. First, solitude is essential for generating new ideas. True, original, creative thinking happens when the brain is unhurried and allowed to drift. Second, it fosters a vital understanding of the self, which leads to emotional balance, improved emotional regulation, and self-clarity. Martin Luther King Jr., for example, often wrote about the clarity he gained during periods of forced solitude that helped him refine and commit to his purpose.
And the third benefit is the most counterintuitive, promoting closeness to others. How does being alone make us better connected?
You have to be alone with your thoughts to process your feelings about others, to clarify your values, and to genuinely appreciate them. If you never have the space to reflect on an interaction or mourn a loss, you can't engage genuinely in the next one. Chronic solitude deprivation actually makes us worse at building relationships.
That brings up a really concerning point in the source material. The risk of chronic solitude deprivation, particularly in the current generation.
It is severely concerning, and the data is stark. Chronic solitude deprivation is directly linked to a massive increase in anxiety disorders in young people, and it correlates precisely with the ubiquitous rise of smartphone ownership post-2011. Jean Twenge's research suggests that the generation that grew up without ever remembering a time before constant internet access is paying a measurable price with their mental health because they have systematically removed this crucial ingredient from their lives. We are not wired to be constantly receptive to input.
So this is not some philosophical nicety. It's a fundamental requirement for mental health. We need actionable practices to reclaim this essential state, especially for busy people.
The best practice is simple and highly effective. Long, regular walks. This is not a fitness walk with a podcast or a friend. It is an unhurried period, preferably alone and without the phone or headphones. It's a dedicated ritual for generating solitude. This activity is what has historically fueled great thinkers and provided immense mental clarity. The payoff, according to sources, is being happier and more productive by noticeably large factors.
You're allowing the brain to work out its problems in the background without external input. What if you need to gain clarity on complicated decisions or difficult emotions that require more structured thought?
That's where writing letters to yourself or structured journaling comes in. The practice provides a structured way to generate solitude and unhurried self-reflection. The critical benefit doesn't come just from reading the words later, but from the act of writing itself. The discipline of composing structured prose, which forces you to slow down, clarify your thoughts, and gain distance from external inputs. It's a mechanism for unhurried, intentional self-counsel.
So once we've successfully created this space in our lives, by detoxing the digital and creating solitude, we need to fill that void with something truly satisfying. That pivot leads us to high-quality leisure.
If you declutter the distractions but don't replace them with something demanding and virtuous, the void will always pull you back toward the easy distraction. We have to adopt the Bennett principle. High-quality leisure should be demanding, effortful, and require mental strain rather than being frivolous time-killing.
So we need to ditch the passive consumption, the endless streaming or scrolling, and choose activities that demand something from us.
Absolutely. The first lesson is activity over consumption, which is the power of craft. Active leisure building something, creating art, learning an instrument, serious computer programming, or repairing a vehicle provides a far deeper, more lasting satisfaction than passive consumption.
And why does craft connect us to that deeper satisfaction?
It connects us to our primal potential. Our brains evolved to use our hands to manipulate the world and solve tangible problems. When you engage in craft activities like woodworking or complex repair, you're grounding yourself in the physical world. When you finish a project, you receive a palpable sense of pride, what the philosopher-mechanic Matthew Crawford calls the ability to simply point. The building stands, the car now runs, the lights are on. This embodied physical satisfaction is the deepest kind of reward. It's impossible to replicate by staring at a screen.
That deep satisfaction also extends to our relationships, which leads to the concept of supercharged sociality.
Meaningful, effortful relationships are perhaps the most powerful and enduring antidote to artificial pleasure. We are profoundly wired to be social, and when we create structured social activities, we maximize human connection and reward. Low-quality digital connection, the shallow like or the brief text exchange, is just no substitute for high-quality structured interaction.
What are the best examples of this structured, supercharged socializing?
Strategy board games are a perfect example, particularly complex ones like Settlers of Catan or even intense card games. They allow for supercharged socializing by requiring complex social maneuvering, careful scrutiny of body language, negotiation, and strategic thinking. You are pushing your social abilities to their limits in a thrilling, structured context.
And what about physical activity?
Another powerful example is social fitness, such as high-intensity group workouts like CrossFit WODs or F3 workouts. The shared physical exertion and group support push participants past their natural physical limits, creating this strong sense of community and collective exhilaration that is profoundly rewarding and strengthens bonds.
Finally, let's address a major practical obstacle to meaningful socializing: the fear of unsolicited connection in a world dominated by text messages. How do we make room for genuine, high-quality conversation?
By implementing the practice of conversation office hours. The major obstacle to calling someone is the fear that you might interrupt them or catch them at a bad time. By instating set times and days, say a specific hour every Tuesday afternoon, or your entire traffic-clogged commute where you publicly declare you are always available for a high-quality conversation, you eliminate that obstacle. This transforms potentially wasted time, like driving, into a rewarding, intentional social interaction, overcoming the low-quality connection nudges promoted by technology. You're essentially scheduling meaning.
This has been a profoundly detailed deep dive, drawing together hard neuroscience, behavioral science, and practical digital philosophy. If we were to summarize the key takeaways for boosting productivity and radically improving mood, we have four major pillars we've explored.
First, the reset. If you're feeling overwhelmed, implement a temporary break, ideally 30 days from high-stimulus consumption, to restore behavioral flexibility and reset your dopamine baseline. Second, friction and focus. Reclaim hours of productive time by applying friction, removing apps from the phone, and using dedicated blocking tools like Freedom to enforce intentional, single-purpose computing. You could potentially gain 2.5 hours of focus daily.
Third, solitude. Dramatically improve your emotional health, your self-understanding, and your clarity by prioritizing solitude through intentional practices like long, regular walks without a phone and structured journaling to clarify difficult decisions. And fourth, active leisure. Find deeper, lasting satisfaction by choosing demanding, high-quality leisure, focusing on active creation and craft over passive consumption, and participating in supercharged, structured sociality.
Ultimately, the choice before you isn't between using technology and abandoning it. It's between living a life of digital clutter dictated by algorithms or living a focused life where you are the author of your own time. It's the choice between letting the tools dictate how we spend our time or putting our deepest aspirations and values in charge of our schedule.
That recognition of intentionality leads us to our final, provocative thought for you to carry forward this week.
Look at the Amish. They're often misunderstood as simply rejecting technology. In reality, they are deep hackers of intentionality, constantly asking if a technology performs more harm than good in supporting their communal values. They prioritize the value generated by acting intentionally over the benefits lost from convenience. So, can you, this week, identify just one core value in your life, whether it's professional depth, family connection, or physical health, and choose just one technology to either strategically optimize or eliminate entirely to better support that value? That singular intentional choice, carried out consciously, is a standalone source of profound value and focus.